Welcome to the Human Cloud Podcast, the spot where leaders come to move the freelance economy forward. Hey, so today we have John Arms. John is a fractional marketing leader himself, as well as the co-founder of Fractional U. Now, I know you're thinking, it has been a ton of fractional leaders, especially compared to the past 3 years of the podcast. And the reason is, fractional has been one of the fastest growing segments of the freelance economy. Now, one of the questions that hopefully you're asking yourself right now, that we've asked ourselves a lot this past year, is fractional actually different? Or is it a different flavor or a feature of the greater freelance ecosystem? Which when we say freelance, we're referring to self-employed individuals doing work digitally first. So, John is going to run through everything. We're going to run through what is fractional, where is it working, where is it not working, where does he see the space going? And man, you're going to hear some stats that are pretty incredible. We're talking about over 100% growth of individuals identifying as fractional. We're also going to really get into the nuts and bolts of what fractional leaders do. And here's a little plot spoiler. When I think about fractional, I think about the strategy and the executive level freelance work, because all freelance work is generally outcome-based or project-based. Generally, the incentives are better aligned so that the actual worker quality, the actual work itself is better than agency or full-time work. And when we're talking about fractional, we're talking about fractional CROs, fractional CMOs, people that can both build the strategy, build the playbooks, as well as resource up the team and even manage the team. Now, I want to make sure I hit on the regional differences of fractional. So here in the US, fractional's been around for about 1 to 2 years. It's been growing pretty well in the US. In Europe, not so much. Even this morning in talking with a leader of fractional, what they thought was totally not what it was. And so Europe has been a little bit behind. And in other regions like the Middle East and Singapore, we've actually seen it move faster than Europe and in sometimes faster than the US, but obviously the volume is not even close to where it is in the US. So I want you to sit back. I want you to really dig into why is fractional where it is today, and a little hint as well, fractional might be able to overcome a lot of the blockers that freelance has purely from a cultural and a perception perspective. So enjoy, John, sit back, and most importantly, go drive some change. Real quick, before we get started, have you checked out Human Cloud's industry landscape? Now, I know we use this word freelance, right? What we're really talking about is a massive industry where the supply, the individuals, are self-employed. But there's actually over 800 global platforms, and there's been over 100 platforms added this year alone. Now, within platforms, every platform isn't the same. There's large horizontal platforms, there's niche vertical, and every day there's a new niche vertical platform. Whether it's a platform for gaming talent, whether it's a platform for shoe designers, whether it's a platform for oil and gas engineers in Malaysia, you name it, there is a platform for it. And there's more than platforms. There are these things called hybrid agencies. There is freelance as a service. There's business to freelancer tools like Collective and Wethos. There's freelance communities. There's onboarding tools. There's providers. There's freelance management systems. Everything is included in Human Cloud's industry landscape. So go hop over to humancloud.org and check out that landscape. All right, enjoy the episode. All right, John, thank you so much for hopping on, bud. Listen, where are you located?
I'm in the Twin Cities. I live in town in the city, and it is currently like not winter here anymore, and I'm loving it.
Can I ask a Twin City question? Someone who has only flown through it, which, by the way, the Viking Stadium when you fly is beautiful. We flew
Unbelievable.
Oh, it looks like what does it look like a Viking ship? It's
Yeah,
so cool.
yeah, yeah.
But I gotta ask, as a tourist, is the Mall of America, is that a tourist trap or is that actually cool?
It's a little bit of both. It's a little bit of both. If you're coming for the Mall of America, you're coming to Minnesota for the wrong reasons. Is we've got. I mean, there's so many reasons to come here, but from a let's go enjoy some time. There is no better summer on the planet than summer in Minnesota. I mean, we own it, right? Our winters suck. They are miserable. Our spring is like a day, but our summers are glorious. And you don't want to spend them inside. You go outside. You go to the lakes.
Listen, we're gonna create a round robin cage match between you, Chicago, Seattle. And what are one of the other ones? Because I lived in
Yeah,
Seattle. They'd say the same thing. Chicago people, they say the same thing.
yeah, yeah. You hear people up in Vermont saying it. Anybody underneath the Mason-Dixon line, summer is just a sweltering hellhole. But up here, it's fabulous. So yeah, so the Mall of America is when you're thinking vacation. The other thing about a little secret about Minnesota is, and I kind of hear myself using my Minnesota accent because I was born and raised here, but it's often referred to as flyover country, and we flippin' love that.
Keep
We
flying over. Keep flying over.
because this like we don't need all the attention. We're like Gen Xers, right? We're great. We don't give a shit what anybody else thinks or does. We're just awesome. We're just happy to be who we are, and just keep on flying. Like if you want the best medicine on the planet, where you go? Minnesota,
That's true, actually. I literally have a
right?
family member who flew to Minnesota for the hospital. Yeah. So, you,
Yeah,
it's kind of funny coincidence. Literally, they flew out 2 days ago, and I kept telling them, Mall of America, Mall of
yeah,
America.
right.
But listen,
Retail was invented here. We created the first
funny.
mall on the planet. Like, but keep flying, keep flying. It's okay.
Keep flying. Um, Listen, I am so excited. I'll give you for you listeners out there, I think it was about a month ago. So I don't want to say I've always, but the term fractional has kind of percolated for the last 6 years, I'd say. But there was no
Hmm.
grasp, right? There was no central point to turn to. And I think I met Brett first and then Karina, and they all said, you got to meet John. And it was crazy. Overnight, it was almost like there was this community of 5 to 10,000 fractional folk that actually spanned across everything in terms of, so I meet either Brett or Karina first, but then over at an investor panel, there's an investor saying, "Oh yeah, a lot of my fractional or a lot of my CPO friends are now fractional."
Hmm.
I then hop over to the enterprise side, and you start hearing, "Oh yeah, we actually brought in this consultant who is fractional, and we're bringing them on as an approved vendor." So it's crazy how just in the last month, fractional has really, really, really kind of had a time, I would
Yeah.
say. And then I met you, right? And then I met you,
Yeah.
and I'm like, okay, I cannot wait to have you on and sort of inform our listeners about fractional. And I know there's three questions that sort of we had come up in terms of where's fractional going, where's the workforce going, and sort of what's happening in the status quo. I know we had those questions, right? But I would love to hear from you. Just let's hear about your background. And now we know you're a proud Minnesotan. Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
Minnesotan? Yeah.
Yeah. Minnesotan.
Minnesotan. Yeah, so
Yeah.
proud Minnesotan. You got a tiny bit of the twang, a tiny
Uh-huh.
bit.
Right.
I'm sure if I piss you off, it'll come out. But listen, John, how would you describe yourself and what you're doing?
So I'm a fractional chief marketing officer. I'm also a fractional growth leader. Those are the two ways I serve companies. And you know the deal. Like they don't have growth leadership or they don't have a marketing leader and they're struggling because of it. So people like me plug in. And that's what I do professionally. The bigger picture to that is I created Voyageur University 5 years ago to train people how to become fractional pros. And there was a reason for that. Mostly the market likes it, and I wanted to do it. And so I didn't want to be in a corporate environment. Anything with the status quo, I sort of reject. So I was done with the status quo and like, this is a really good path for millions of people. Let's go about the business of helping it happen. So that's those are some professional dimensions of me and what I do. So now I'm an advocate. I'm a teacher. I'm an instructor for fractional.
I love it. And let's, if we could, let's start off by getting insanely tactical and geeky, and then we can get fun, okay? So let's start off tactically. When we mention, hey, we're going to have a fractional CMO or a fractional growth leader, what exactly does that mean down to like, what does the statement of work look like? Does that mean that you are drafting the growth plans, the marketing plans, you're driving and creating the OKRs just as a chief marketing officer would? Help me understand what is the tactical sort of statement of work and stuff that you're doing?
Yeah, so the tactical statement of work comes after the primary value that every fractional delivers, and that is leadership. Leadership is the core. That is the vein of gold that people are tapping into. That is the vein of gold that people are bringing to the marketplace, is an astounding ability to bring leadership to a place that is absent of that particular flavor of leadership. So it might be marketing leadership, it might be ops or finance leadership. But what's happening is businesses are like, yeah, we're not very good at that. Or we've tried it and failed. Or, yeah, our COO is also kind of head of sales. And they're feeling it, right? They're like, it's probably not the best solution. And so, but leadership is the key. And of course, what comes with leadership? Like, what is there? What are the ingredients of that? Wisdom, seeing around corners, some level of forecasting and predicting. So all of that does come through in a scope or a contract, but the core is leadership where they don't have any. And so how that manifests in the contracts that we suggest and we teach and we share with our students are the problems you solve. The very first thing, I am here as a leader to solve these types of problems, and this is what that looks like, and here's how we do it, and here's how we measure it and all that. Only after that does any level of tactic matter, which is the easy stuff. I talk to fractionals every single day, and it's so funny. You talk to those folks that are, we have 20-year careers, we have 30-year careers. We've been solving things. And I was actually, speaking of Karina, I was talking to Karina earlier today, and she's just an amazing optimizer. She's a COO. And, looking at, the way she solves it, it's like, well, what is complex to me is like a slow Tuesday for her. And that's only possible. It's only possible because of her decades of experience and her leadership abilities. So that's really the core. That's the core. And then the scope becomes the scope.
That is fascinating. And when we mention problems, right, from your vantage point, are we talking, hey, generate revenue? Hey, generate leads. What are some of the common problems that you're seeing you and your fractional folks solving?
Yeah, I like to think there's 6 that always need attention. And this might just be me, but when you think about every business has to have customers, and that means the customer experience has to be really, really good. And that's going to come through some filters. And my friend Eric Thurwinger, who I do another podcast with, and we coach businesses. And so it might be a sales problem. And sales are down, or it's not always sales are down. Sometimes it's our salespeople are a pain in the ass, or we don't have any accountability. There's all sorts of problems that can come with that. Same thing for marketing, same thing for ops. But the customer's going to feel these 6 things. They're going to feel your product. They're going to feel your team. They're going to feel your solutions, your systems. They're going to feel your leadership. They're going to feel the solutions that you bring. So those 6 places, there can be any number of problems there. And those things that the customer feels have to be attended to. And so if it's systems, you better tighten up with your ops, right? If it's solutions and products, you better tighten up with your products. If it's sales and marketing, you better tighten up with that function of your business. So these are super common fractional leadership roles. And I would say probably elevate to maybe more of the higher priority. Because if your sales suck, right, you're dealing with that.
Gotcha.
Or if your team hates you and everybody wants to leave, you're dealing with that, right?
And I wonder when we dig into sort of what, because I'll give you the follow-up question is going to be related to, hey, why not hire full time, or why not go with an agency, right? So we're going to hit that, but before that,
yeah,
when you see clients going to fractional, are they typically coming saying, hey, this is exactly what I need, meaning here's the job description of what I need, Or are they coming and saying, like you said, we have this massive sales problem. Can you please scope out what that job description or what that project statement of work should be? What's the level of understanding that the clients usually have? Because that's one of the biggest troughs in the freelance economy is marketplaces will say, hey, fill out this form, and client will say, go kick rocks. I only know this problem, and I'm not going to take the time to fill out this massive brief. Yada. So what's the level?
Wow. Yeah. So talk about one of the more unstable things in our economy right now, right? Like, how do you describe the position, the job, the problem? I would say it was pretty stable from pretty much up until about a year after the pandemic. People like, I know what I need. I know who I need. I know how to go get it. I know how to write it down. It was pretty predictable and stable because we have been doing things in a way for 40 or 50 years in a certain way. And then everything changed, right? So much changed. First of all, access to talent. 11 million people left the workforce. Whoa, wait a minute. It's 11 million less people. That's what of our professional workforce. That's 8-9%, something like that. Like, whoa. So the dynamic changed. So with that, companies had to really think deeper and not do things the way they did. So originally it was, here's the job, here's the scope, here's the description. I would say in the last 2 years, and certainly in the last year, there's been a cathartic moment on the hiring side. And that is, it isn't working. It's the process is goofy. The everything from the talent acquisition systems to the recruitment people, like it just seems to be a very broken system, which gets them farther away from solving their problems. They're using old rules to kind of a new market. So now what I'm seeing, the transition is companies are like, I have been trying to hire and we're floundering. We're looking for unicorns. We want to pay someone that can solve a COO and a CFO problem and own that. But because we're looking at the budget, we only want to pay $300,000 a year for it, and it's full time, and that is deteriorating. That is crumbling, and of course it's crumbling because A, there are no unicorns; they're a myth. B, somebody will come in and be good at one of those, but they won't be good at both because they don't have 20 years of experience at both. And so that there's this wonderful awareness on the business side. They're like, yeah, we got to change the way we're doing things. So I get phone calls like, dude, John, what the hell's fractional? Can you teach me? Can you coach me? Like, I'm talking to chambers of commerce. I'm talking to businesses. We teach them on this. Like, I got to know what this is because the way we've been doing it is not stable anymore.
I love it. And so when you mentioned, I think the quote might be, there's no unicorns, but fractional might be the closest to get you there. And I don't want to jump the ship, but like there's numerous things when trying to understand, because I come from a very skeptical place, very intentionally, just because change is hard, right? And especially when we talk about the workforce, the last thing that companies want to do is change, especially as HR is generally not the change agent, right? Just in general,
right.
It's not in procurement. But so, one thing in terms of when I look at fractional, I kind of look and I think that it potentially might amplify the good things about freelance without having the bad. And one of those really good things is aligning the incentives. And so if you have a full-time chief marketing officer, either they're interviewing behind your back and you don't know about it, or they're stuck with just you. So they might not necessarily make the best decisions in terms of what's best for your company if those decisions are actually not best for themselves. Meaning, if you have someone in sales that should make a hard decision, but that hard decision might not be for their best interest. Whereas fractional, the incentives are always to go above and beyond your client expectations, and you aren't hindered by it. So, there's just a preview of something I was thinking, but I wonder what you would think.
Well, you're certainly right on the thread, I think, of what's driving so much fractional. Are you a fan of EOS, or do you use EOS?
Is that the entrepreneur operating system?
Yeah, Traction, the book, and all that.
Yes,
there's a lot of tools like that, and there's something you hear a lot, and that is, and I think they advocate for it or talk about it, is you have to have the right butt in the right seat. You have to do well as a company. You have to have the right butt in the seat. It doesn't say one button, 3 seats. It doesn't say no butt in a seat that's important. Like, you have to have the right butt in the right seat. And so that's important, right? That makes perfect sense. We understand the logic there. But when you think about, okay, how am I going to do that under our current company, under our budget constraints, under our political constraints inside the business, under our current, like, just how we operate, people are learning, like, I can't do it where I have one butt and three seats. So what fractional allows you to do is, it's not so much, because that's a unicorn, right? The unicorn is one butt, three seats. What fractional says is there's actually three seats that need to be addressed. So you're bad, your numbers are really down. So maybe you have a sales and marketing problem. And usually with that, there's probably a product problem somewhere. And you will never find a unicorn to solve all that. But you can find a fractional marketing leader, a fractional sales leader, and a fractional product leader. All of those people for the price of one unicorn to solve that problem you're having in the business, which is poor sales. So when you think about that, like, okay, now I have three butts and three different seats. They all cost me collectively less than the unicorn, and I get some pretty good stuff out of them. I get leadership. So it's not a replacement for unicorns. It's putting the three people that you need.
Now, I wonder, John. Let's So there's two directions that we can go. Okay, I'm gonna let you pick. And direction one is going to be, how come full time isn't enough, and direction two is going to be, how come freelance marketplaces aren't enough. And let me just put a little color behind this. So I've always been conflicted on freelance marketplaces, right? I started freelancing in 2012. My current view, and I always have, what is it? Firmly held, loosely held, or whatever that term is. My firm belief is that the incentives are there, that good platforms will always be needed and ever increasingly needed. So that's my first thing there, right? That's one direction you can go. Second direction, which is going to be why full time. And I'm going to sound very, very, very old in saying this, but man, it would be nice as an individual to just stay at one company my whole life. That'd be kind of cool. Likewise, as a CEO, it would be great to only have full-time employees that I know wouldn't leave and that we only promote internally. That would be pretty cool, right? So you now pick, John, which direction do you want to go, my friend?
Oh man, I'd like to talk about them both, but I'll talk about that single butt, that CEO who wants that dedicated employee, and then employee that wants that single job. Let's talk about that.
Let's do it. All right,
let's talk about that. I'll talk about why that has deteriorated. So there's been countless articles written about this. Research is happening at scale. Like, when you look at the idea of a single job for your career to turn out well for the employee, it's not an idea that's embraced any longer. It's just not. Our culture of layoffs to correct bad decision making has led to a cynicism that the company will take care of me. That wasn't there before the 80s, by the way. Simon Sinek talks about this a lot. He talks about, and I write about this in my book, in Revolt, is, before the 80s, we didn't have this. We decided shareholder economy is our focus. And so layoffs become a cost-cutting thing. And there wasn't really a whole lot of hand-wringing that came with that. But before 1980, we didn't have that. And there was this tremendous company loyalty and this tremendous employee loyalty that everybody could rely on. And all that started to deteriorate in the 80s. And then, of course, it's all shattered to the ground now. I mean, like, any poll is going to tell you, ask anybody if they think that their job is secure, that they can't get laid off, they will tell you no. It's just not real, right? It's just not real. And we know better. So love it. I love that idea. But the reasons that doesn't exist in our society are more cultural than they are economic. Is the way our workforce works and operates and the way we reward and thin corporate ladders, like, it's not ideal for loyalty on either side of the equation. So you have to look at it differently. And so what I contend is, I'll give you a story. My dad worked for the same company for 42 years. And he was an amazing man. And he started in the mailroom, and it became a very high producer at a brokerage firm called Piper Jaffray and Hopwood, which then got bought by Morgan Stanley and all this. 42 years. He retired, in the 90s. But that was fine, right? Like that, they counted on them, and that was a perfect relationship. And then we don't have that anymore. This doesn't happen. And that's just where we are culturally. So what do you do with that, right? If you want to have that person you can count on, well, that means you have to behave in certain ways. Like, okay, then you have to build some serious levels of trust. And when you look at the corporate culture we have, would you say trusting is one of the key features? Right? No. It is, right? It's just like, it's just not. And so if it's not, then we have to think about different ways and different models that we could achieve that.
And the closest I would say, it's so funny. I was talking to, I started in Silicon Valley. So I hopped on a plane, went to San Francisco and said, I'll do anything to self-teach myself how to succeed here. And I think instead of trust, I think what we saw was there was a little bit of coddling. And so, for example, companies would just try, at least big tech, would try to acquire as many employees as possible. And it didn't really matter if they were working on, important stuff. All that mattered was that you had them and not your competitor. So there was that combined with this idea that, okay, everyone matters, right? And the reality is no. In companies, there is a hierarchy for good reason. If you are a first year, you do not have the same say as the CEO. And then you add on, in the US at least, you add on the idea of advocacy and everyone becomes a kind of social warrior, and you just, that didn't work. And so I'd say, at least from a tech perspective, we took the trust and we replaced it with coddling. And the reality is you can't run a company that way. And so no kidding, we're seeing now tech as the last in terms of bastion of layoffs, but it's really fascinating you mentioned that. Now let's hit the next of the why not the existing external talent structures. And so one thing that I did not know when I was freelancing and got into the space was how much of an existing industry is here. And so it's staffing agencies, there's this massive VMS and MSP landscape. Procurement's already dealing with external talent providers. And so, the skeptic would say, okay, fractional is going to be a feature of the existing industry. And I don't think that's the reality, but over to you, John. Why aren't you just seeing existing firms have fractional SKUs?
Yeah, so I think you hit it on the head there. Fractional is going to be a feature of something. But I think if you say it's going to be a feature of the 1099 economy, the freelance economy, the consulting economy, is really not where it's providing its greatest value. It's an inside feature. And what I mean by that, and I'll draw some distinctions here that we teach. So when we teach the differences, like freelance is important. You need a new website built, go get somebody who can do that. Build it, pay them, and you're all good, right? That's not a full-time thing. Same thing with consulting. Like you need to study a market, understand a thing, like go do the study and spend the money, and it's got a beginning. And these are great additive things to a business, right? That lives in that economy, that belongs out there. But what about the things that aren't that way? What about the everyday things that need attention, that need focus, that need leadership, that can't be a consulting thing? It can't be freelance. That's called fractional. But aren't full-time. That's called fractional. So it is not so much an aspect of the freelance independent bundled in there, I think is an innovation in how companies build their org charts. It's an inside job. One key question with that I want to touch on is we study our population a lot. So we've taught thousands of people and we help others, and there's all this stuff going on. We ask them, like, what do you love about this? And what do you miss? Or what's different now that you're a fractional, that when you were a full-timer at, Fortune 500, why? Like, what's different? And you know what the number one answer always is? The meetings. The meetings. And then we ask, how much time did you spend in meetings? On average, 8 hours a day. These are things that nobody misses, by the way. 8 hours a day in meetings. Were they productive? Absolutely not. They kept me. I hated them. I hated every minute. I didn't want to do them. I had to stay up late and work because I was in so many meetings. You have to ask yourself, why is the status quo of working in America so meeting centric. And what can we do about that? Right? How do we avoid that altogether? All right. Well, how do you do that? So what fractional does is I'm not there for all that wasted time. I'm only bringing great value in small pieces of time to the key issues. And I'm not involved. I'm not doing the stupid 6-hour meeting on what kind of pop we're going to have in the pop machine this year. Which the amount of time that is spent in meetings is a horrible aspect of the way we do work. And we don't need it. And businesses are realizing this too. Fractionals learn it early because they're like, well, because I left and I didn't like it and I hated it and my colleagues hated it. And that's why we leave, because we don't like the meetings. And businesses are like, well, I don't freaking like them either. What can we do about it? It's so status quo. We have to do it, but they're completely unproductive. And so if you can remove those from your time, all of a sudden you've got 8 hours a day back. That's why full time is not so great.
We talk about the meetings. It's funny. They're like why? Because I always ask too. I'm like, hey, everyone's not a bunch of idiots, right? So like, no one's sitting here saying, hey, we want to create the most broken work system ever. But the reality is, from my understanding, the way I've seen it is okay. Once you accept that it's full-time default, then you're going to make some incremental choices to increase incremental measures like retention and churn rate. And it might actually, decrease churn by 5% if you do a pizza party on Friday. But what you're not seeing is that it's not connected to long-term impact, right? And you're not hitting on what your fractional folks care about. So I wonder how, or let's hit your question on where you see Can you still define to me today how large you think fractional is and who it encompasses? And then I think we can hit the where it's going. How does that sound?
Yeah, you bet. So right now, let's use LinkedIn as a data source for this. Everybody listening, go to LinkedIn and do a search, do a sales navigator search, and ask people with fractional in their title. It's going to be about 90,000 people. 90,000 people self-identify as fractional professionals on LinkedIn. They're not all on LinkedIn, but there's 90,000 human beings saying, I'm a fractional pro here now, right? So that's just on LinkedIn. So there's a population, right? Fractionals United has probably coming up on 10,000 members in that community. We've taught thousands of people to become fractional. Like, it grows and grows and grows. So this is a number where we're at today. These are not consultants. Now, there's a distinction there because fractionals do a lot of consulting work and freelance work. We open ourselves to all those revenue streams, but fractional is the core. Anyway, so those are some numbers, right? Those are some numbers as of March 5th, 2024. What's the momentum, right? Well, I can tell you 3 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago, Jason, my partner at Voyageur, he's amazing at the data. And like a couple of years ago, 2.5 years ago, he's like, I think there were 2,000 people that self-identified as fractional on LinkedIn. So what's the percentage delta in 2 years between 2,000 and 90,000? And put that on a growth arc, and that gives you an idea on, at least from the supply side of the equation, where it's going. Now, there's another side to look at as well, the demand side of the equation. Where's the fractional going to growth come? How many businesses are going to actively hire fractional, and for what reasons? Well, that's a little bit harder to measure. You would normally go in and say, how many job postings are there for fractional pros? I don't know that data, but it has more to do with the way they're going to solve it. Over time, how many businesses are going to say, we are not paying people to be in useless meetings anymore? We're not doing that. It's not part of how we're going to operate our business. We're going to be a lot more efficient. We're going to be a lot more loose. We're going to be a lot more flexible. Once they start addressing those things, fractional comes in to solve a lot of that. And so there's a couple different ways to look at where it's going.
That is absolutely fascinating. And is there a floor or a foundational requirement in order to be fractional? The reason I ask is because if I see a 22-year-old just out of school come up to me and say, I'm a fractional X, do I turn around and say, no, you're not? You have, is there a years of experience requirement? Is there a tactical outcomes you must be able to prove requirement? What would you say is like the foundational floor when you see fractional to know that these individuals have this?
There's a couple markers. First of all, if you're under 30, I love you to death. But your life has not given you the time to develop tremendous leader skills yet. You might be a good fractional in an area, right? But, leadership and wisdom and experience are accrued over time. And I'm not saying a 28-year-old person can't do that. But if leadership and wisdom and guidance are the key factors, then there are some inputs that are markers that say this person has those assets. One is time, right? Have you been in your category, in your market for a long enough time to understand it, to see around corners, to fail enough? That's probably, failure is the number one teacher. And if you just haven't had enough opportunity in life because the clock only turns so fast to fail, then your learning set just isn't big enough yet. So time in market, time in your trade is a marker, right? There's a lot of argument and discussion about this, and I love the argument and discussion. I'm part of this thing called the Fractional Leadership Alliance. And it's a group of us people who care about fractional and what it can do for the world. And we argue about this all the time. And it's fun. It is so fun. And because it's like, well, are you a C-level executive? Does that make you a good fractional? Like, were you like the highest person, or were you somewhere in the middle, but you did a lot of really good stuff? Is it your master's degree? But it keeps, and I don't know where that's going to settle, by the way. To me, it keeps coming down to the what you have been faced with in life. Has it taught you wisdom and acumen and skill? Have you built relationships from it? You're probably a good fractional. I will tell you, sometimes the highest level of achievement in a corporate environment is not great for fractional. Because when you think about that, like, let's say you were the CEO of a Fortune 10, right? You just want to be fractional now. And sort of like, well, you're used to having like, I don't know, hundreds of millions of dollars in budget and assets to tap into. And now you're working for a $10 million, manufacturing company. Like, we got to do these things. Yeah, we don't have any resources that you're used to having. So there's some serious learning curve that has to happen there. And I'm not saying, their wisdom is probably super helpful, and that's most of the value anyway. But so those are some markers: age, wisdom, things that you've accomplished. I personally don't think that your title has as much to do with it. But I could see where somebody would go, well, I want somebody who was a C-level, right? I can see that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so really it's just tenure and time. And
tenure and time, I would say that mindset is huge, and that's one that just doesn't show up on a resume or show up. Like, mindset is really, really huge in fractional. Are you a giver? Are you a leader? Are you a grateful person? There's so many things in mindset. When we teach this, like mindset, there's like 5 energies in fractional, and mindset is kind of where we go. And it's like, do you have a community mindset? Because if you do, you're a really good fractional. It means you like networking and connecting and helping. This makes for really good fractional people.
That's, it's funny. So I'll give you a little hint why I'm going to say this. I kind of started in like blue collar manufacturing. So whenever I hear anything related to usually networking, community, I'm like, bullshit, right? But where I'm going to say it might not be, is that in order to make a big impact as a leader, you obviously have to be able to understand the full spectrum of people that you're working with. You need to be able to talk with multiple, and in a fractional capacity and a freelance capacity, being able to go across teams is so crucial, right? And being able to deeply engage with individuals to understand their motivations, their incentives is the name of the game. So I'll give you a pass on what I'll call softy language, but that's okay. I totally understand where you're coming from. Now let's and it's funny, John, actually. So the other John, so John Younger, I would argue, has by far the best data on global freelancers, and one of the overwhelming insights from it is that freelancers suck at networking. So this might be where fractional, like I mentioned, fractional might amplify the good and not have the bad. That might be an example where fractional leaders are already used to the networking. And let's be real, politics, I never forget when I was at Microsoft, politics isn't always a bad thing. If you know how to work the game, it's actually pretty good. And that might be how you make moves and get masses of people to do what you want, right? So It's not the worst. It's not the worst.
It's
Depends
not.
how you use it.
Yeah. It's funny because I get addressed a lot. They're like, God, sometimes you come off like you hate corporate America. I'm like, I don't. I just hate bad behavior. I hate unjust bad behavior wherever it shows up. Small America, big America. I don't like bad behavior. I don't like ageism. I think it's stupid. Corporate America suffers from ageism. They look at people who are older as less valuable assets. You stick that same person in a small business, and all of a sudden they're the freaking top of the heap. They are exactly what you need. Same human beings, same DNA. So different perspectives are out there. But no, corporate America is fantastic. We need it. Small business America is fantastic. What we don't need is the bad behavior that comes from a lot of that.
Right. So now let's get into where it's going. And you tell me the foundation you want to use. I will say what's top of mind for me in terms of where it's going is I think it's obvious we can say there's going to be more fractional, right? I think that's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
I do really wonder what infrastructure you see playing around this. Do you see there being fractional talent platforms? Do you see there being ancillary services like referral technology or productivity technology? I'm kind of really interested in the infrastructure around this. And then kind of a question that I'll probably end up asking you, right after is going to be, well, what macro events might happen that potentially get in the way? So for example, if there is a massive recession, right? I think the UK, it was confirmed they were in a recession right now.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a recession, is fractional going to keep going, right? If we
That's
have an election, right?
Yeah.
We have an election coming up. Who knows what's going to happen? Either way, we know it's going to be a lot of probably chaos. So what happens? So let me frame it with you tell me the foundation you want to use, but I'm really interested in what infrastructure you see coming from this, and then also what's the impact of certain events.
Sure. Well, I'll start with the infrastructure. So we'll talk about the human cloud for a second. Like, here's where you guys are going to kill it. This is where your idea of however you describe. I've read the book and I've seen it, and thank you for sending it. But like this place, this interchange where humans can connect and engage and around work, right? Like those are really, really critical. So that's what you're building is really important infrastructure. And it might look like really important for freelance and consulting, but it's really important for fractional. I'll tell you why. Is if the concept with the human cloud is to connect a business with fractional, it's somewhere in there that's like, well, we want to do that, right? Well, only about 20% of the people that we teach, and we teach new business in fractional, only about 20% of the people are going to do the things to get clients. And that's okay. That's okay. That is just fine. They need people and places and help in that capacity. So things like what you guys are doing, there has to be a place where that can happen. And it has to work. There has to be value for everybody, right? The thing I always, for people that do the kind of things that your category does is, it sounds exhausting that you got to go find so many clients and keep work coming to the people. I think that's going to evolve quite a bit. I think when what you guys are doing is you're staying in front of that, but that can be pretty exhausting. So that has to be figured out at scale. But there's always going to be a room for 80% of fractionals to have some place where that connection can be made between supply and demand. So I think that infrastructure is only going to grow, and I'll tell you why. So let's say we do have a recession. So first thing that happens is we look at the bottom line, we look at the budget, and we start making cuts. And you don't want to cut so close to the bone that you die, right? You don't want to cut out major organs. And so you can't do that. So you start making cuts. You go, we had, $3 million in money for talent in our sales division, right? And now we have 40% of that. Well, we're not going out of business. So how are we going to address that? Oh, we're going to go talk to Matt because we need fractionals, right? Like that's how we're going to do it. Like, because fractional means you can keep living, you can keep growing. I'm going to argue that all you're really doing is cutting out 8 hours of wasted meetings a day anyway. So you should be doing fractional even before the recession. Is you have to go get them, right? Because then you can keep growing, cut your costs, and there's no expense. So there's no cost. You're not going to fail, right? If you start cutting out like sales, then you're just waiting until your company collapses. If you start cutting out IT and ops, like, well, then it's just, you're going to collapse and you're just delaying the inevitable. But if you want to stay in business, you got to get cost. You have to have the greatest value out of that. You go to fractional for that. Of course you do. So I think that the next 4 or 5 years, as it relates to connecting supply and demand, those places where that can happen are critical. Here's my cautionary tale to everybody who's in there, though, is it has to be anchored to value. And that's really the challenge is some of the knock on WeWork and some of those places is it gave us access to an ability to reach out and get things done and really not be super concerned with the value. Like, can I get a website built for $9.29? Yes. Is that going to jettison my business forward? No. But you're going to get a website for $9.29. The value of wisdom and leadership, I just have not seen it yet apply to interchanges as much as more transactional stuff. And do you see that? How does that look to you?
It's such an interesting point. Just to clarify, right? It has to be tied to value. The way that I see it, the way that we see it, is that talent platforms are a extension generally of the founder. And so what usually happens is that you have someone who's really good as a freelancer or as a director and above, who are hiring a bunch of freelancers. And they then go, well, there's a gap in that what I'm doing, there's no solution for. And so they go and they create an independent consulting platform, or they go and they create an ad platform, or a paid ad platform, or a bespoke website design. So they extend to the founder. Then what generally happens is they're able to get the first niche of clients. And what they think is that it'll be tough to get the freelancers, but the reality is that's never hard, because if there's work, there's always people, right? Mm-hmm. And typically what we can see happen is that they do, and you nailed it perfectly. It's they can get distracted by things outside of the 80% of freelancers that just want work. And so they'll prioritize things like community. They'll prioritize things like training for freelancers, when that is helpful, right? It's not a no. It's more a prioritization to make sure that the client's more important. So that's typically what we see is talent platforms going beyond the scope of just having a good experience, right? Or they'll do things like they'll invest in the tech. So they'll say, we're going to do a $500 to $1.5 million build out of the tech, and this is what's going to move our business. And the reality is, no, you can actually duct tape most off-the-shelf softwares to do exactly what you needed. But what you can't do is you can't automate the relationship management of being able to sit with a leadership team and scope out why they need you, i.e. the value. So you nailed it, actually. You absolutely nailed it.
That's a key differentiator between, we talk about fractional is a permanent role that's part-time, right? Whereas everything else is project-based. So the nature of what fractionals seek is like freelancers and consultants, they want a project. They want a task. They want an assignment. That's awesome. Fractionals want relationships, right? Relationships you solve over time. They change. The market changes. We love that. We love to live in that constant state of change and then helping clients survive that. That requires a relationship, right? So for the buying side of that, well, what has to happen with that is you kind of come back to trust, all of a sudden, I do need relationships that I don't have. I thought I could buy my solution by paying a lot to a salesperson with a great Rolodex, right? That doesn't give you a relationship. That doesn't give you a problem solver. It just gives you a big LinkedIn profile. So the relationship on the buying side, I think, is going to really come into the equation these next couple of years. I am vulnerable here. I want to grow. We don't have everything we need. Being super honest about that. And building relationships, not just vendors.
Yeah,
that's huge. That's everything.
You nailed it. You also nailed it. I mean, part of the misunderstanding when it comes to this space is the assumption that, and I'll never forget, one of the early thought leaders, right? Actually, people would know his name. Talking with him, and he said, "Hey, everyone wants to be an entrepreneur," and I laughed, right? And I was like, who the F is everyone? Because this is painful, and I would consider this a mental illness, not something that I want everyone to do. And I'll give you another example. It's like my wife asked me, like, we always talk about, hey, what if our kids wanted to be like you? I would say, well, they should go to therapy first, and then they should figure out if they really want it, because this is not for everyone. And so you nailed that 20% of fractionals love the hunt, right? And they want to go out and sales. But I always envy the what was it? Was it Bell Labs? Like those and Bell Labs and what was the one in Silicon Valley that Xerox PARC, right? I envy the people that just totally nerd out on solving really tough problems, and the last thing on their mind is let me go build a pipeline of sales and convince people to buy this, right? I absolutely envy. But the problem is with freelance, and the more we go there, is people can assume, oh, everyone wants to be a freelancer and sell. And the reality is no,
that's true.
People want to be selling. Yeah. So you nailed it. Now, I wonder, John, I want to give you the stage, and we sell this in the pod, but I really just want you to show off the things that you're doing. And the reason I say it like that is because I know about the conference, right? We know about the course. Where can both fractionals and also, what does Brett call it? Like corporate curious?
Corporate escapee. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Like, but so also people that are trying to either be fractional or they want to go find a sustainable talent pool of fractionals. I just want you to show off on the things that you're doing and what this industry can expect over the next 12 months.
Yeah, you bet. So I would say that the center of gravity for fractional lives in 3 places right now. One, it lives in the fractional community. Like, where is all that energy aggregating? Where are all the fractionals gathering? And by and large, that's in Fractionals United. Like, that's where it's not just people saying I'm fractional, but they're participating in that community. So that's one center of gravity. FRAC, the annual conference, is another center of gravity. That's where fractional people and people who hire them are gathering and aggregating and networking and challenging. So there's that. Voyageur U, our thing, that's where it's being taught. That's the curriculum. So those are 3 awesome entities in this world. Now there's this new one I was talking about, the Fractional Leadership Alliance. So it's a group of us that care about fractional, and we're gathering and saying, well, we're trying to create another nucleus. It has more to do with standards and sort of like an underwriter's laboratory. Like, what are the rules, right? Which you try to write them, but they'll break in about 2 minutes. But there's some center of gravity happening there. So that is where I would say the places that you can access it and learn about it and find it and hire it. But you have to remember, it's new. That's what, I hear so many people say, I've been doing fractional for 30 years, or, I get it. But in the American economy and the global economy, fractional is new. And it's not just new because of what we've built these past several years. It's new because we're changing so much in how we get work done. Like the post-pandemic and the talent supply and the entire way supply and demand is connected. It's all new. So fractional is inherently new. So, but it's forming, right? It's forming, and it's getting its nucleus. Where that's going is, I'm just going to say, it's going to continue on the path. Businesses are like, I much rather have value and problem solving than I do churning time. Having people, well, you talked about this in your Silicon Valley days, we just bought bodies so nobody else could have them. That's not a decision based on value. That's based on I don't know what it's based on. It doesn't make sense to me. But, that is we just have the bodies. In case something bad happens, I think businesses globally are going to say, no, it's all about value. And I'm only going to pay for it, and I'm only going to structure for it. And that's what we're going to lead. And that has to change. It's got to take a new shape, completely new shape.
Yeah.
Think about it. How could the world, the way it's been for the last 40 years, continue? Could we make more billionaires and aggregate more of the revenue up there and not spread it to I'm not saying a distribution. I'm saying there's better ways for everybody to thrive that doesn't rely on extraction and hiring people so somebody else can have them, but actually based on real value delivered. You ever follow Scott Galloway, Professor Scott Galloway out of NYU Stern?
I've seen him live.
Dude is amazing, right? Like he talks about this craziness of how we do work, and like, dude, this is all going to crumble.
Yeah,
it's not sustainable.
It's I will say, the last point with it, what's interesting is that the notion that if it's not full-time employment, it's not good is very interesting, right? And we're dealing with this at a legislative level. We are dealing with kind of legislating against this, right? And you saw this. California would say they're trying to protect Uber drivers, but the reality is 72% of them want to do it. And then there's millions of classes that get exemptions. And so, it's what's most interesting to me is that a full-time job, although it sounds good, it isn't necessarily best for everyone. And a large majority of people are saying, no, I don't want that. I don't need that. And I don't need you to protect me by giving me a full-time job or making a farm, right? I don't need you to protect me. I'm fine. Not to sound too American, but right? Like I can find opportunity. I don't need you to coddle me and protect me. So
I think you're tapping into the vein right here that I think matters most in this whole conversation, and that is self-determination. So we have not been a self-determined society for a very long time. We've been a corporate determined society. But the way America was built on self-determination. I'll give you a couple of examples. There was a point in our history when we were primarily an agrarian society, mostly farmers. Every single farmer to this day is an entrepreneur. So to say like, well, self-determined or fractional, or it's not for everybody, I disagree. I'm like, well, sure, it's built into our DNA. We love freedom. We love self-determination. You don't need to protect me. That's as American as it gets. And we haven't been practicing that as well for a very long time. And I look for it, and I'm encouraged by watching it come back in fractional.
Yeah. Well, John, that is the perfect way to close it out, man. Usually, I can't say that most episodes we start to listen. We could talk history I could talk forever. But most important question, John, for our listeners is where can they find you and all the work you're doing?
You bet. So you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm there. I'm sharing stuff and all that kind of stuff. If you go to fractionalconference.com, you can find what I do and what we do for that. If you go to Fractionals United, I'm in that community. I'm always speaking on this. I'm on podcasts and public speaking and all that kind of stuff. So I'm out there stumping for the small businesses that hire fractionals and stumping for the fractionals. I should say it. You can find me at voyageuruniversity.com. Why didn't I say that in the first place? Where we teach you. Well, because there's so much going on, right? Like, oh yeah, I have this other business too, right? But there's so much going on, and it's so important what we're doing, and we're not doing it alone.
And that was perfect because your accent came out in that last thing, so that was great. So for you listeners, there's the official accent. Go to Minnesota, visit the Mall of America, then say hi to John. John, thank you so much for hopping on, bud.
Hey, I'm happy to do it anytime. Thank you for what you do.